So, I've been thinking. Recently there was a report that came out, or at least some type of statistical analysis on Gamepass, and it basically said that Game Pass was cannibalizing full game sales. And I don't want to talk about the article itself, but more so about Game Pass. Because for as long as it's been out now, and even like kind of in the earlier days when it was first coming out, it kept being advertised as like, oh, it's the Netflix of games. And that never really sat right with me. And a lot of that comes down to simply just like how people play games. Like, I don't remember where this study was, but I believe the average estimation of like a player session is like 2 hours. And like for context, like a usual television show is like 24 minutes. One if it was like aired during like a usual type of time slot, like with time for ads. A streaming show can go up to like, now it can almost go up to like 28 on the dot. Some go up for like almost the direct hour. And some specials in movies typically go for like an hour 30 minutes. And all that's still below that average player time of like a 2-hour gaming session. And that usually goes in a way that like developers tend to kind of design like the first 2 hours of a game so that you get a good general feel for how it is. Of course, there are going to be some games that have like an intro that go on longer than 2 hours, but especially since Steam kind of started doing its 2-hour refund period, 2-hour refund window, you see a lot of people making that judgment on games now within about 2 hours. And 2 hours is a lot of time for people to figure out if they like a game or not after they spent money on it. Because another thing that kind of breaks Game Pass from being this Netflix for games is that games are an active activity. Like, when you're watching a show on Netflix, you're not having to constantly press buttons on a remote to make sure that the game is continuing. You're not literally making sure that the characters get from point A to point B. You're not determining how long their dialogue is. You're not going on side quests or anything that like quote unquote takes the character away from the main story. Like, no, that's all part of the episode. The B plot, a good way of kind of comparing it is that there is like usual shows have like, well, not usual, but some shows will have like an A plot that happens that is the main focus of that episode, and then there's a B plot that happens. The B plot would be a side quest, and depending on the player that you are, you can have an entire episode of B plots. Like, you can have 30 minutes, 40 minutes, over an hour worth of time dedicated to either grinding or side quests, or you can just do the main story and beeline that for 2 hours. But you're constantly, maybe not all games, but you're usually constantly in control at that time. Like, you don't get to sit back and just watch the game kind of play out, depending on the game that you're playing. But even then, the ones that you are kind of sitting back for, you're waiting for your next input. You're waiting to be a part of the activity, a part of the thing that is going on. And this ends up kind of falling into how, especially at least when it comes to Game Pass games, if people aren't really engaged or they're not having fun, probably within like, I would say like the first 30 minutes, what reason would they have to ever come back to your game? Like, especially when you have Game Pass with however many games that it has on it right now, why would somebody slog through 2 hours of a game that isn't impressing them within the first 10 to 15 minutes, when that same 10 to 15 minutes could be spent either playing a game that they already know that they do like, or trying something else that'll get their attention sooner. It's not the same thing like a show, where like, oh, okay, I can try this show out. Like, I can watch, let's say, 3 episodes. For, I guess, anime old heads. I hate saying that now. For anime old heads, like, you would usually do, like, the 3-episode try. Like, you would watch the first 3 episodes, figure if that's for you or not, and then either continue with the show or drop it. And that's, like, 3 episodes at 24 minutes apiece. 24, 48... It's like, you're roughly, like, giving it, like, a little bit over an hour. Like, a little over an hour, 3 different episodes, and, like, getting a feel for it. That's typically why the first 3 episodes of anime tend to be the way that they are, where the first one is very introductory, the second one sometimes expands on the setting a little bit more, and the third one usually gets you kind of into the flow of how things are, or shows more of, like, what it usually is. That's why you'll end up seeing, like, very controversial shows do something very big and bombastic in the first episode as a way to hook people in for a longer time. Or you'll have a 3-episode twist, like Madoka. But the point being, it's easier to sit back and watch a show for a little over an hour than it is to sit down and play a game for a little under 2 hours and figure, like, okay, is this actually fun? Do I enjoy how this plays? And if they don't enjoy how that plays, what is stopping them from closing a game, deleting it, and then downloading something else? Because another factor into this is the fact that you have to download the games each time. At least that's also partly why Microsoft is kind of making the push for xCloud, so that you can stream games. But streaming games doesn't work for a variety of reasons. The input lag when it comes to certain games, which can outright kill certain games. There's a reason why fighting games don't really work over streaming. There are some more action-heavy games that don't really work over streaming. They would work surprisingly well for some RPGs and some strategy RPGs, but again, that's like a case-by-case basis. But, like, let's say you spend, like, 5 hours, like, somebody who has, like, not a really great internet connection, so they get Gamepass, and then, like, okay, let's say that they want to download, like, what, a 5 to, like, 10 gigabyte game, nothing like AAA size, which would be, like, 60 gigabytes. You download that game, it takes you about let's say, like, it takes you 1 to 2 hours to download that game. So you sit there, you wait, you either can't play anything, or you play something single player for like an hour, 2 hours. Like, hey, let's say that you're even trying out another game that you have on Game Pass in that time. So you're playing that for an hour, for 2 hours, you're making the decision on that. Not really your thing. You close that game, you open up the new one, or you start downloading something else. Then you play that for 30 minutes or an hour, and you're like, this also isn't my thing. You get rid of it, and then you move on to something else. It's very anti-bingeable, because you're not designed, it's not designed to give you that time to acclimate to the game, or to kind of slowly get into it. You're very pushed. You're very pushed to make a decision, because you're just kind of pressed for time. Like, you have a limited amount of time. Again, like, a lot of people will have a job. They're working for most of the day. They come back home, they want to try something, they want to enjoy something. And if that thing isn't enjoyable within 30 minutes, what is the reason for them to keep playing that game? They're better off just rolling the dice, surfing through Gamepass saying, oh, this looks interesting, or oh, I heard something about this. Download it, give it a try, and then just move on, I guess. Because I think a slightly unspoken factor that I think is really starting to kind of come into view is that when you're able to just kind of say like, oh, when you're essentially able to channel surf, surely people know what that still is, surely. But when you're able to channel surf games, like, you're able to just scroll by and say, oh, that looks interesting, I'll download it. And then you download it, then you try it for 2 hours, and then, oh, that's it. Like, you're not doing a lot of that effort on your end as a consumer to see if that is something that you like. You're not incentivized to put in that research as a consumer because it's not your money on the line. Technically it is, because it's still Game Pass and you're still subscribed to that service, but like if you're like most people who only ever buy like 3 games a year, like, and let's say that because one of those games is typically always going to be Call of Duty, Game Pass gives you Call of Duty for free. So one, you're not spending that $60 on Call of Duty anymore. You're spending $20 a month to continue to have access to Call of Duty and to whatever other games are also on Game Pass. But the amount of time that you have to play those games isn't expanded. You're simply kind of just, it's packing peanuts. You're finding stuff to play in between when you're playing Call of Duty, or in between when you're playing Fortnite. You don't have more time to play all these other different games. They could put Final Fantasy VII Remake or Rebirth or Persona 3 on Game Pass, and like, those are 100-hour RPGs. How willing are you to spend all that time on those 100-hour RPGs when you still only have like 2 to 6 hours a week to kind of just play at your own leisure? And let's cut that down by like another 4, because let's say like those 4 are the times that you spend playing with your friends. You're playing Call of Duty. You're playing the main reason why you got Game Pass, so that you could always have access to Call of Duty and all the other games as well. It doesn't make sense. Like, you're just... It's too much fluff. There's a thing, there's a concept called decision paralysis or choice paralysis, where if you have too many options or too many choices, you become unable or unable to make more singular specific choices that you would otherwise. I think the example that I remember the most is like ketchup in a grocery store, where like, oh, if there's like 5 to 10 brands of ketchup, you get so caught up in the decision of making it because you're like, well, I don't want to get the ketchup that I don't like, but which ones do I do like? So then you start having to like do all this extra work on your end, which gets in the way of all those ketchup brands like being sold, and then they start cannibalizing each other. They cannibalize into one another's sales, which is why instead of having those 5 to 10 different brands, you would instead have like 3. You would have 3 because that makes your decisions, that makes it a lot less work for you to figure out what you want. So you go, oh, I don't like that one, I know I like this one, and then that's the other thing that I don't know yet. So you either stick with the thing that you do know, you avoid the thing that you don't like, or you go for the new thing. And if you don't like that new thing, then you can always go back to the thing that you know that you do like. It makes it easier for people to make those choices. Another factor of that also is that it is your money. Again, like spending that, like let's say that like you used to go to a game store and that you used to have like $20, not enough for like a new game, but maybe you could get like an old game that's on sale or a game that was traded in. And you just like, this looks interesting, this looks weird, I'll try it. And then you try it, and then like, maybe you're not really with it, but you already spent that money on it. You already made that decision in the store. So you're like, okay, maybe I'll stick it out, and I'll put more time into it, and then I'll try to figure it out. And then you do overcome that hurdle. And then you're like, oh, wait, I didn't know that it worked like this. It actually works this way. And then you start liking that thing, and then you kind of get really into that over time as you're spending more time with it, as you overcome those hurdles that are like unhooking you from your previous practices. That's how you get into weird games. That's how you get into trying different games. When you have so many choices directly in front of you, it doesn't make you more inquisitive or interested in different games. Sure, you'll try other games, but what reason do you have to stick with those games? I probably very obviously alluded to it, but like I did that a bunch of different times. A lot of times with games that were like very weird, but because I spent money on them, I didn't want to feel like, oh well, I can't return it, so I have to play this. I have to figure out like what this really is because I already invested this money into it. I ended up trying Catherine because it was a really weird game, and I'm like, let's try a weird puzzle platformer, see what this is. And then that became one of my favorite games. I ended up getting Resonance of Fate. I ended up falling off of that game very early on, which is like the case for 90% of the people who play it. But then eventually I went back to it because it's like, I have this game, I spent money on this, I want to see, like, I want to get over that hurdle. And eventually that also became like a game that I really, really, really enjoy, but also have a really, really hard time recommending to other people because it does have that hurdle. But again, this kind of relates back to that video I said about, that video that I had about like why I don't like casual games. And a lot of that is like that acclimation period. It's that, tension, that tension and that roughness that a new experience gives you, that you kind of have to spend time figuring out. You have to chafe against it a little bit, but then when you chafe against it, then you can figure out, okay, do I actually not enjoy this, or was I approaching this the wrong way? Gamepass doesn't teach you that. If anything, it teaches you it teaches you to fall within like a very specific niche or a very specific type of interest that like you either already have, or it kind of coddles you into making those very rapid decisions where, oh, I either like this immediately, or if I don't, then it's not worth my time because I'm spending money on this thing where I could be spending time with something that I do enjoy elsewise, or I do enjoy otherwise. So it's, I don't know, it's weird. I think it just kind of ends up bleeding into like an overall thing where kind of just, again, like a lack of tension, or there's a better word that I keep thinking of, but I can't remember it. But it's a lack of it doesn't really want to be really, I want to say, an experience, but it's not so much an experience that I'm trying to say. Experience isn't the right word. It ends up messing with how people kind of approach new things, where it's just like, oh, this has to be 8 out of 10 or 10 out of 10 immediately. I have to like it, I have to understand it, I have to get it completely. It doesn't allow any type of nuance to grow. It doesn't allow the players to grow as they're introduced to more systems or how the game actually operates. It's very immediate in how rewarding it is. where like, oh, if this isn't catered to me, then it's not worth my time. You can't have any like types of twists, or you can't have like those 2 hours be a type of narrative hook, or else people will chafe against it and then be upset and then bounce off and then try to find something else. It coddles them into a very specific mindset of how they approach games. You don't have that period of, again, just like actually trying to engage with the game on its own terms. It's very, I want to say narcissistic, but that's not the right word. Egocentric? No. It plays very much into catering. Where if the game isn't catering to the player in their specific taste and their specific interests as quickly as possible, they'll write it off, and then it's negative word of mouth where they'll say like, oh well, this game sucks because it's not this, or this. And then because a lot of people just can't have their own opinions, they'll say, oh well, the game sucks then, instead of being like, wait, that actually sounds like something that I'd be into because I like this, and this. And I don't know. I think people need to be more inquisitive and willing to try things that are outside of their comfort space. But there's just like a lot of different systems nowadays where they don't really want to do that, where they just kind of want to coddle you in a very specific way. It's like teaching a kid how to eat their vegetables. Like, yeah, you're probably not going to like them immediately, but maybe if you saute the broccoli, maybe if you put a little pepper on it, maybe if you cook it with different sides, like, it takes effort to figure out the things that you like, and it takes effort to figure out the ways that you like it, even if it's in something that you don't usually like. Like, I don't really like racing games. I don't really like racing games, but that's not entirely true. I like street racing games. I like having the ability to customize my cars. I like racing around a city map. I like being able to learn about shortcuts like through the city. I like police car chases. Like, no, I like racing games, but I like a specific version of racing games. But that doesn't mean that I'll like all racing games. But that takes effort on my part of being able and willing to try those different types of games to figure out what gels with me and what doesn't. It's self-curation as opposed to a system that algorithmically curates to my likes. Which is very funny considering that that I kind of have to hope for my own videos to be catered algorithmically to people who like it. Speaking of liking, I hope you liked the video. Please leave a like, maybe, like, I don't know. Here is a call to action. What's a video game or like a show that like you didn't initially have an interest in, but because you gave it a try, you ended up really gelling with it? I genuinely really like to know. I already gave an example of Catherine, Resonance of Fate. I want to think of like another one. Because there's a lot of different types of games that I usually kind of, I don't want to say avoid, but not a lot that I really end up, there's not a lot of genres that like I really kind of jumped into very off the cuff. I'm going to say, I think Metal Gear. Yeah, I think Metal Gear was a very kind of wild instant jump that I made. Like I had never really played a game like it before, but I got very interested in it, so I kind of took a leap. And it took a while for me to get used to how that game controls, but now I really, really like it. And now it became like one of also my favorite franchises. So yeah, thank you for spending time with me. I hope you enjoyed yourselves. Feel free to subscribe. You can follow me on Twitch. I stream usually every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 7 p.m. Sometimes I'll also do a stream on Tuesday or Thursday. And follow me on Blue Sky too. So yeah, take care. Jane.